Hello and welcome again. In this video, we will talk about the WPDB class and how we can utilize the WPDB class to create our custom database table. The WPDB class is an abstraction class for database access. WordPress has this WPDB class, which we can use to execute SQL queries instead of using raw SQL statements or using the PHP MySQL functions. The WPDB variable is a global variable that contains the object of the WPDB class. We can also replace and override the WPDB class by adding a db.php file into the WP content directory, which is known as a drop-in. But I will talk more about that later in this video. First, let's get an overview of the WPDB class, the functions available, and how we can use it to perform database queries. In the handbook, you can find very useful information, best practices, and examples of different methods. Ensure that you explore this handbook in detail. One important thing you need to take care of is escaping, which is critical for security. As we all know, SQL injection attacks are a risk when executing SQL queries. We must make sure the SQL query is safe for execution. The WPDB class already takes care of this, and some of its functions automatically apply escaping, but some methods do not. In such cases, WordPress provides functions like escape SQL and others that we can use for escaping. Let's go through some of the methods available that we can use to perform CRUD operations, that is create, read, update, and delete. Using the global WPDB object, the first function we will look at is the getResults function. This function can be used with a select query and it will return the list of rows found in an object format. Alternatively, if you prefer the output in an array format, either indexed or associative, you can pass that as an argument as well. There is also a prepare method which is used to escape the data before executing a SQL query to prevent SQL injection attacks. If you're constructing a custom query, whether it's a select query or any other type of query, and the query contains dynamic values, it's always better to use the prepare method. This ensures that any data passed in the query will be escaped and will not contain any malicious code, helping you to avoid SQL injection attacks. We will see how this works in action in a demo later. Prepare also has placeholders which are used to indicate the data format. Passing these placeholders is very helpful in the prepare method to understand the type of data that the user is passing. Based on this information, it can perform escaping, checking, and validation to ensure everything is correct. For example, %s is the placeholder for string, %d is for integers, and %f for float. These placeholders are then passed to the prepare method and it will correctly handle escaping and validating the data. In the following example, we use the query method to execute a query that executes an insert query prepared with the prepare method. Instead of directly passing values, we pass the placeholders, and then in the subsequent arguments, we pass the actual values in the same order as the placeholders. For instance, we might have a post ID, meta key, and meta value. This method helps avoid SQL injection attacks by ensuring that the data is passed in a safe way. We don't need to manually worry about escaping or sanitizing input because the prepare statement will handle that for us, checking the data format and applying appropriate validations. Once the prepare method has done its job, it will return the final SQL query, which is then executed by the query method. There are more methods available like getResults, then there are getRow, getVar, and others which are useful for interacting with the database. These methods are part of the WPDB class and we can use them to perform various database operations. Next, we'll look at how to create custom database table in WordPress. I have already prepared a demo for this. For the demo, I have created a function called MLB create DB tables. Before proceeding, I want to clarify that this demo isn't related to movie library. It's just a custom demo to show how to use the WPDB class to create a custom database table in a plugin. It's also important to note that database-related functionalities should always be placed in a plugin and not in a theme. This is because a theme can be changed, but plugin will persist. First, I have declared the global WPDB object. When WordPress loads, the WPDB class is initialized and an object is created, which is then stored in the global WPDB variable. Then, I have set the character set collect from the database configurations to avoid hard coding values in the plugin. I have used the WPDB classes get char set collate method to get the default character set and collation. If collation is not empty, it will be returned with the appropriate settings. Next, I have used this information in the SQL query to create a new table. Then I'm calling the dbdelta function to execute this query. This function is defined in the upgrade.php file of the WP admin and includes folder. If the dbdelta function is not already loaded, I include the necessary file so that I can use it. Then we pass the create table query to the dbdelta function, which will handle the table creation or modification as needed. I have also added a if not exists check to handle situations where the plugin might have been previously installed, deleted multiple times, deactivated or reactivated, and the database table is already present. If this happens, calling the database creation function on the activation hook could result in a MySQL query error because the table might already exist. To avoid this issue, I have added the if not exists condition to the SQL query. We then call the dbdelta function. Let's quickly review the documentation of the dbdelta function. This function modifies the database based on specified SQL statements. It is useful for creating new tables and updating existing tables to a new structure. For example, if you are developing a plugin and you need a custom database table, you may create a table in the first version of the plugin. But later, in the new version, that is, in a later version, you might want to modify the table, either by adding a new column, changing the column types, or making other database table changes. For these type of updates, you can use the dbdelta function. This function is versatile because it allows you to pass an alter query or update table query and it will execute those changes on the database. Now, moving forward, I have created the database table using this function and I have hooked this function on the activation hook. This ensures that the table is created only once when the plugin is first activated. Database table creation is mostly a one-time operation, so it doesn't need to be executed on every page load, which is why it's placed in the activation hook. One important note is don't delete your custom database table on the deactivation hook. Let's say if the user accidentally deactivates the plugin or deactivates it temporarily for testing purposes, deleting the table on deactivation would cause data loss when the plugin is reactivated again. Instead, handle table deletion on plugins uninstall hook. Also, in the plugin settings, you can provide an option such as a checkbox that lets users choose whether they want to delete all data, including the custom database table, when the plugin is uninstalled. If they check the box, all plugin related data will be removed. If not, the data will be preserved. But again, do not delete the database table on deactivation. You should only delete it on uninstallation. With this practice, users will have control over their data when they deactivate or uninstall the plugin. Let's go through the demo quickly. I have already activated the plugin, but now I'll deactivate it and reactivate it again to demonstrate how the table is created. After deactivating and reactivating the plugin, if I go to the database table and refresh it, we can see the WP products table is created. The table contains the following fields: ID, name, description, and price, with the appropriate data types like integer, varchar, long text, and float. In the table structure view, you can grab the create table SQL query from the database interface. As a developer, it's often a pain to write the create table query manually. So a shortcut is to first create the table in the database with all the required fields and then copy the generated query into your code. Moreover, you don't need to worry about the character set and collation because you can retrieve those from the WordPress configurations using the WPDB class. Once you modify the query as needed, you can use it in your code. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Jai WordPress!